So we're having a discussion in this class about careers in international affairs, and one possible option for students to think about in terms of their future career is international journalism. So today I have with me journalist Ariel Reshef. Thank you for joining me, Ariel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Section. It'd be great for students to hear from you about your background and experience and how you ended up becoming a journalist, because you had a little non-traditional path, shall we say, in terms of the things that you studied, the programs or the education that you had, and how you ultimately became a journalist. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you ended up in the field of journalism?
Sure. It's a long story and a long journey, but I'll try to make it as quick as I can, not to bore the students. I graduated high school here in Oklahoma, and then I went to Indiana University. I decided that I wanted to have an out-of-state experience to just try to interact with people that I didn't know and to try to meet all kinds of different people. And so I pursued several different majors at Indiana, first in vocal performance, then fashion design, and moseyed my way through and finally found political science and Jewish history, and they really spoke to me. And then through political science, I found international affairs. And I had a professor who was really inspiring to me and really pushed me. She was one of the most difficult professors that I had, as it turns out, and she eventually had me TA for her in the course of international affairs, which inspired me to move to Israel for my study abroad program and study abroad at Tel Aviv University, and really got a window into the Middle East from that experience there. So then I came back for my senior year, finished at Indiana, and decided I wanted to go to Washington and see how policy was made on the issues that face the Middle East and also here us domestically. So I was in Washington working for a nonprofit for about 3.5 years, and then finally decided with my then boyfriend, then fiance, now husband, that we were going to move to the Middle East, and we decided to move back to Tel Aviv. He had never lived abroad. He had traveled all over the world, but never actually lived abroad, and I also wanted more of that experience. So we did that together, and I applied to my master's program in diplomacy and conflict studies, and really fell in love with the field of conflict studies and conflict resolution. And then right as I finished my degree, as it happens, my family was visiting Israel, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was a typical college student, even as a master's student, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I don't have a specific goal in mind. I just know that I love this field. We were sitting on the couch watching the Israel Broadcast Authority news, which is the only English news broadcast in Israel for Americans or people that speak English, to learn about Israeli politics, to hear about economic issues facing Israel, social issues, sports. And so we watched that actively every night, my husband and I, and we were watching that program, and they told the viewers, kind of in a joking manner, that 2 of their female anchors were going on maternity leave and they needed someone to fill in for those anchors. So my family, being the supportive family they are, turned to me immediately and said, "That's your new career." And I looked at them with shock and awe on my face and said, "There's no way. I have no experience in this field. How in the world would they hire me?" So with a lot of coaxing, I applied for that job at IBA News as an anchor. Forget being a reporter. I just went straight to anchor. Why not? And I sent in my CV, and I got an email back, very nice one, from the man who would then become my co-anchor, saying, "We really are impressed by your resume. We really like all of the things that you've done. We like your expertise in the Middle East, but there's a small problem. You have no on-camera experience, and we need an anchor." I don't know if you read that part of the requirements. So I said, "Fine, I get it. I'll move on." And my husband absolutely turned to me and said, "No way. You're not moving on. This is meant to be. You have to write them back and say, if you can't say no to me until you actually meet with me. Give me a chance." And I said, "There's no way I'm doing that." Well, in the Middle East, there's a term called chutzpah, which is a little bit of, gumption. Take a little initiative. So my husband says, "Take a little chutzpah and write back to whoever wrote you and say, please give me a shot." So I did. And lo and behold, I get an email back from Leah Zinder, who was the chief anchor at the time. And she says to me, "Okay, come in, fine. You can screen test with a bunch of other, candidates for the job, and we'll see how it goes." So I drove to Jerusalem, and I sat in front of a teleprompter for the very first time in my entire life. I had never read from a prompter before, and screen tested for an anchor position at Israel's only English-speaking broadcast. Next day, and by the way, I had interviewed with several people that were far more experienced than me, who knew what they were doing and had seen the prompter many times before. The next day, I got a phone call from the news director, and he told me they wanted to hire me. And I thought there could be two options. One, he's either crazy, or two, he might have misread when he was going down the line of all of the different candidates. He misread my phone number and mistook me for someone else. But truth be told, he actually wanted to hire me, and he did. So it just goes to show that you just never know. I call this my serendipitous twist of fate in my life. And it goes to show that you can land in your passion, which for me is international journalism, is journalism to begin with, without even realizing that's where you're going.
So the moral, there are several morals to this story because it's just such a fascinating one that, first of all, you may not end up in a career in an area where you've studied, that you could actually, in fact, prepare yourself or have different experiences that may end up leading to a certain career path that you hadn't intended. Is that perhaps one of the morals of this story?
100%. I would say that, my foundation in political science and Jewish history really forced me to be a good communicator, to learn how to write well, to really listen to people. Also, being part of being a good communicator is actually a skill set of listening to people as well. And also my diplomacy background gave me that same ability to really sit back and take in all sides of an issue and to try to be as unbiased as possible in dealing with people, even if I have my own proclivities and my own ideas of, inside me. As a journalist, you're forced to really harness your own perspective and listen to the people that you're interviewing. So the communication skills are essential. And from my background, I was able to generate both the verbal and nonverbal communication. I used to write op-eds, which is a great exercise in getting your opinion out there in 500 words or less. So yes, one of the morals of the story is you don't have to pursue a career in journalism, or you don't have to pursue a major in journalism in order to be a fantastic journalist, or in order to be taken seriously in this field. You have to be willing to build the skill sets necessary to be a journalist. So one of those things is communication.
So what are some of the other lessons that you've learned in terms of the skills and advice that you would provide, I guess, for young students today that are thinking about a career in international journalism?
Well, first of all, go into the field to begin with, because it's a fascinating one and you'll never be bored. You'll be tired, but you'll never be bored.
So you're giving your 2 cents for international, be an international journalist.
Yeah, obviously I'm a bit biased on that side of things, but I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned, if you listen to my story, is don't take no for an answer, even if that no comes from within yourself or if it comes from other people around you, whether it's in a job interview or trying to get into a master's program or, submitting an application for something. You have to take the initiative and go for it. Even though you might think that you'd be embarrassed in the end that you did it, just shoot high and do the best you can. See where the chips fall, but don't ever shortchange yourself. Make sure you don't say no to yourself, and make sure you don't let others say no to you as well. It's that persistent gene also that's one of those tenets of journalism. We have to push through no on a daily basis. There's people that don't want to talk to us. They don't want to give us an interview. So you have to find a way of diplomatically getting to yes, so to speak.
Persistence, perseverance, determination.
Right.
These are good characters.
Right. And no is an evil word. No is an evil word. And I would say the second thing is, if you can, try to travel. Whether it's in your means to travel internationally or not. Try to travel within Oklahoma if you're a student here at OU. Try to travel to neighboring states and meet people, talk to people with different backgrounds and different experiences than you've had, because the fabric of society is what makes our job as a journalist so interesting. We interview people, I mentioned on a segment you just interviewed me on, that I've interviewed President Shimon Peres in Israel, but then I've also interviewed people that are equally important here in Oklahoma, like a farmer who's having a trouble with the drought, or people that have lost loved ones. Those people are equally important, which leads me to my next point, which would be to stay as grounded as you can. No subject that you interview, whether it's a head of state or it's someone here in Oklahoma that's struggling with a certain issue, they're equally important, and you should always treat them as such when you're going out in the field and you're trying to, really gather a story. That's one of the things that is incredibly important to remember, that no human being is more important than the other, even if their title might lend itself to that. And finally, I would say be well-rounded in your education. I'm a good example, and I don't know, I don't want to base everything on my experience, but, that's what I know. I studied many different things. I had many different ideas. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that actually turned out to be the greatest asset I ever had, was my inquisitiveness about several different fields. Be an expert on a lot of different things. take yoga, go for a class in international affairs that you wouldn't necessarily have taken. Take something in the medical field, in sciences. As journalists, we cover a plethora of different topics. And if you can bring expertise to those topics, it makes you even more credible out in the field. So, and it also, as a person, it makes you more well-rounded. And I think that if you don't pursue a path of journalism in your education, you can lend credence to your own ability to get a job in journalism if you have a bunch of skill sets or a bunch of knowledge from different facets of, different ideas. I mean, whether it, like I said, whether it's the arts or it's science or it's medicine or it's history. A lot of journalists are history backgrounds. A lot of people go into law and then decide to pursue journalism. So there's no tried and true method to become a journalist. I'm sure some of my colleagues may disagree who went through that rigorous process of becoming a journalist the traditional way, quote unquote. But to me, being a good journalist is about having the skill sets, having the drive, and having a humanity about you.
Well, that is the tremendous advice. Thank you so much, Ariel, for providing that, because not only have you given the students some insight into professional skills that they should develop, I think you've really given them some great ideas about personal characteristics and skills that they should develop in order to live a happy life. So no matter what their career.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Ariel, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts with the students.
It's a pleasure, and I wish the students the best of luck no matter what course they should pursue in life.